Hello everyone, my name is Riley O'Neill, and in this series I take a look at my grandfather Don O'Neill's paintings. In this particular video, we're going to go back to Riverside, California and take a look at the downtown mall at the Mission Inn.
Okay, so today we are looking at Downtown Mall Riverside by Don O'Neill. This painting is really neat, and for several reasons. The first is that this painting is full of contradictions. At first glance, you would say this is a Mission Inn painting. I classify it as a Mission Inn painting on DonO'Neill.com. However, the Mission Inn is really just in the background. It's not detailed out. There's a little bit going on, but you don't really see much of the Mission Inn here. It's in the background. Second, it's an urban painting. You know, this urban painting is how a person would see this scene as a pedestrian on the Main Street Mall with the Mission Inn just in the background. And yet, once again, most of this painting is of tree life. So here it's a Mission Inn painting, but the Mission painting's in the background. It's an urban painting, and yet most of the scene is of nature. I think that's really cool. And third, and that is the foreground, which you can even figure is the main subject matter, which is so large and prominent. This is a phone booth and a public restroom, both of which have been torn down, and this whole mall's been redeveloped. I was told they were torn down in around 2008 or so, but I don't remember them even before that. I think this is very remarkable that such prominent importance would be given to a phone booth and a bathroom. Before I actually show you the various parts of the scene, we're going to look at this as a value pattern. It's such a good idea to always do this with your work, and I feel that my grandfather's paintings are such a good example of this. By turning the saturation all the way down, we could see how it looks in just black, white, and gray. You can see the light values, the dark values, and the middle values. Watercolor students often have a hard time going dark. They don't think it can go as dark as possible. The reality is it can. And here we kind of see some really good uses of it. So the value patterns. The first element of this painting I want to show you is the background. This might be the only video I record where I start with the background. And because the background is the Mission Inn. My grandfather's painted the Mission Inn hundreds of times. And usually it's front and center. Usually it's the prominent part of the picture. And yet in this one, it's not. It's subdued. It's desaturated. And I think something really neat that you should take note of is that the colors that are used in the Mission Inn are also used in the plants and in the other structures. It's not given any special importance, which really means it's part of the background. The next part I want to show you is all the tree life in this painting, because this painting is mostly a tree life painting despite being a city life painting, an urban painting. And that is, the first thing I want you to know is that the trees are not really green. If there is green in them, it's highly desaturated. The greens do alternate between light and dark, and they do alternate between saturated and desaturated. But for the most part, there's no intense green anywhere in the trees. And this is really important. A lot of times students will reach for a student grade paint or even a professional grade paint in a green to paint their leaves. And the reality is a manufactured green pigment is way too intense for natural life. Under most circumstances, definitely under these circumstances. So the greens are dulled, they're subdued, there's nothing really intensely bright about them. However, they take up most of the painting, and there's a large value contrast between them. And the whole point is really create a pattern more than individual leaves or individual trees, but you do see hints of those as well. Okay, third, I want to actually show you the foreground now and how it moves into the background, because there's some bit of perspective play here. The objects in the foreground are a really neat phone kiosk. Payphones don't really exist in public anymore. And on the right, there was a public bathroom. Both of these have been torn down. I read that they were torn down in 2008. My memory says earlier, but they were at least closed by then. I don't remember having anything to do with him by then. But what I want to show you here is that these are really cool because these don't exist anymore. You know, these are scenes of a bygone era in a quickly changing city. And it's kind of neat that they're the subject matter. However, I don't think they're the subject matter. I think the entire scene is a subject. And you're not supposed to pick out one thing and be, this is the painting and everything else just backs up the painting. Everything kind of unifies with everything else. Now, what's really cool is there's a bit of perspective play here, and that is, as you go beyond the structures, you will see some figures. Figures are very important in paintings, and my grandfather put them in whenever he could because they give a sense of scale. They give a sense of this is the size of humans versus the size of everything else around them. And even though they're tiny little blobs in the background, there's a bit of a play between the foreground and then how your eye can push back into the background. The color palette for this painting is also very interesting. It doesn't lean too heavily towards any single color and is very muted. The greens are muted, the violets are muted, nothing is particularly intense. And this is how it goes back to the value pattern. If the value pattern is very strong, which in this painting it is, the colors give you freedom to create mood. And there is mood in this painting. In addition to the design unity, there is mood, and it brings the human part, it brings your emotions into it. My grandfather would frequently talk about how there needs to be a unity in paintings, how every part kind of exists with every other part. And sometimes you do have important, prominently displayed subject matter where the subject is the story and everything else reinforces it. And sometimes it's an all-over feeling. I really do think this is an all-over feeling. I don't think you could say, well, the subject is the Mission Inn. That's the most important building. It's the most architecturally beautiful building. You could say, well, the subject is a payphone and a public bathroom that nobody would really care about. They weren't not particularly nice in my memory. You could say the subject is this treescape, but the reality is that everything ties together, and it really creates the scene of what it felt like to be on the downtown mall back in the 1980s and 1990s.
Thank you very much for watching. I hope you can find that to be most useful. If you did, go take a look at our other videos here on Series 3 and visit us online at dono'neill.com. Thank you.
Thank you.